Fiancé proposes with a $38 Temu ring. Now I'm wondering if I should marry him. I ate up for wanting a better ring and questioning our future? In the world of love and commitment, everyone imagines their proposal to be a fairy tale moment. A memory captured in a glistening diamond. A reflection of the bond shared between two souls. This story begins with a young woman named Emily, a 27-year-old with dreams and aspirations, who had been in a loving, stable relationship with her 29-year-old fiancé, Jack. For 3 years, they shared laughter, adventures, and countless dreams of the future, believing that their love could weather any storm. But little did Emily know, a seemingly small and glittering detail would lead to a whirlwind of emotions and questions she never thought she'd have to face. It all started on a clear autumn evening when Jack got down on one knee in the most picturesque spot, under a canopy of golden leaves and a sky painted with soft shades of twilight. His voice was steady, eyes filled with adoration as he asked, "Will you marry me?" Emily felt her heart race, her hands trembling as she said, "Yes," with tears of happiness streaming down her face. The ring he slipped onto her finger was a delicate oval cut, lined with what appeared to be diamonds across the band. It was simple yet elegant, and for a moment, everything was perfect. Emily cherished that ring, and her friends and family gushed over its beauty. It became a symbol of her future with Jack, a promise of a lifetime together. But soon, curiosity began to whisper in her ear. One evening, as they lay in bed, Emily casually asked about the ring's details. She wasn't particular about diamonds or moissanite, but she was curious. Jack's response was hesitant, a vague answer about not remembering the specifics. When she glanced at his phone, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. Jack was browsing the Temu app. A simple question about the ring's origin turned into silence. When Emily asked if he had bought the ring from Temu, Jack's reaction was telling. He brushed off the question, muttering, "Does it matter?" before leaving the room. Choosing to sleep on the couch that night, Emily lay in bed, her mind swirling with confusion and hurt. Was it the cost of the ring that bothered her? Or was it something deeper? The next day, driven by an unease she couldn't shake, Emily downloaded the Temu app and searched for a ring. Her heart sank when she found an identical one listed for $38. How could this be? Jack made a substantial income, $200 a year. Was this the best he thought she deserved? Emily wasn't materialistic. She didn't need $1 million rock. But the thought of a $38 ring left her feeling unvalued. As if their future was built on something fragile, ready to tarnish or break. As Emily sought solace in the wisdom of strangers on the internet, the responses were varied. Some criticized Jack, calling him cheap and unthoughtful. Others suggested he might be testing her loyalty or doubting the longevity of their relationship. Each comment planted new seeds of doubt, and Emily found herself spiraling. She had never imagined breaking off their engagement, but now she wasn't sure where they stood. Emily's emotions were a storm of confusion. On one hand, she wanted to give Jack the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he thought he was getting a great deal. Perhaps he was rushed or genuinely didn't realize how important a sturdy, quality ring would be to her. Yet, on the other hand, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this wasn't just about a piece of jewelry. It was about how he valued her and their commitment. Jack eventually came home, and they had a long, emotional conversation. He apologized for his reaction and explained that he had done research, finding the ring highly rated. He promised to replace it if it ever broke, but his lack of understanding of her feelings left a rift between them. The ring's origin had tainted the joy of their engagement, and Jack's response only deepened the divide. Emily reflected on their past. They had built a life of shared experiences. Not extravagant but filled with meaningful gestures. She recalled the times she had supported Jack when he made less money than her. She had driven him to work, cancelled her plans to support his family during hard times, and had always given selflessly without expecting anything in return. This wasn't about money, it was about feeling respected and valued. The tension between them lingered. With Jack retreating to his brother's house for a few days, Emily was left alone, replaying their conversations and trying to understand if she had overreacted. She knew that relationships weren't perfect and that every couple had their struggles. But as she looked at the ring on her finger, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. At the heart of Emily's turmoil was a lesson she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't about the cost of the ring but the intention and thought behind it. She knew many women who had rings that weren't expensive but held deep sentimental value. Her friend Sarah, for example, had a simple gold band passed down from her grandmother. Sarah wore it with pride because it symbolized a legacy of love and devotion. But this Temu ring didn't carry such a story. It felt hollow, a bargain find that reflected a lack of care. Another memory came to Emily's mind. Her parents had celebrated their 30th anniversary with a simple yet meaningful gesture. Her father had bought her mother a new wedding band, not because the old one wasn't good enough but to honor the years they had spent together. It wasn't about the money spent but the love and thoughtfulness behind it. Emily wanted that kind of depth, that kind of intention. Finally, Jack returned home, and Emily knew they had to address the issue once and for all. She explained her feelings, not with accusations but with vulnerability. She told him how much she loved him and how the ring had become a symbol of something deeper. A question of whether he truly saw and valued her the way she had always hoped. Jack listened, his defenses lowered. He confessed that he had been overwhelmed, wanting to surprise her but also not fully understanding the weight of his choice. They made a plan together. Emily would choose a ring that felt right to her, and Jack promised to be more thoughtful in the future. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but they were willing to work on it. In the end, Emily learned that love is not about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about being seen, understood, and valued for who you are. And while the ring was just a small part of their story, it opened a conversation about their future, one built on mutual respect and genuine care. Through this journey, Emily discovered that love requires more than a shiny token. It needs understanding, compromise, and a willingness to learn from each other. In a world obsessed with appearances, it's easy to get lost in the glitter. But true love shines from the heart. And that's the real treasure. I hated for divorcing my wife after she thought I was lying about being r*ped as a child? Imagine revealing your darkest trauma to the person you love most, only to have them turn it against you at your most vulnerable moment. A secret you carried for years, too painful to share, is finally voiced, and then shattered by betrayal. This story is about how one man opened his heart, faced unimaginable rejection, and ultimately fought for his right to heal. Keep watching if you want to know how he found the courage to rebuild his life after hitting rock bottom. From the moment we are born, we are told that love is the thing that can heal us, save us, and bring us happiness. And while love has immense power, it is not always given in the way we need. The story I want to share with you today is not just about trauma, but also about the courage it takes to rebuild after being torn down by the people who were supposed to help you. It is about the reality that sometimes the person you trust the most can be the one who does the greatest harm. Our protagonist, let's call him Jack, experienced something that no one should ever endure, especially not at the tender age of 9. Jack was repeatedly assaulted by his older brother's babysitter, a woman who was supposed to care for him and his younger brother. She was a college student who turned what was supposed to be safe, playful afternoons into nightmares of manipulation and fear. Jack was coerced into staying silent through threats and bribes. Candy, video games, things that would normally make a child happy, became tokens of abuse. To the outside world, he might have looked like a lucky kid who got spoiled by his babysitter. But the reality was sinister. The babysitter's grooming made Jack both scared of her and attached to her in a distorted way. She ensured that his young mind was twisted to believe that his silence was necessary, that her abuse was somehow their shared secret. When Jack tried to share his painful truth, he was met with disbelief. First, he went to his parents, strict Catholics who didn't want to believe that something so vile could have happened in their home. Instead of support, he got blame. His father lashed out, insisting that Jack was lying and corrupted by pornography, something that Jack, at 9 years old, barely understood. His mother wasn't any better. She punished him for making up stories. That was when Jack first realized that speaking the truth didn't necessarily mean getting help. For years, Jack bottled up the abuse, burying the memories as deeply as he could. He tried to lead a normal life, going to school, making friends, and focusing on what any teenager would: sports, music, studies. But the trauma was always there, a shadow lurking in the back of his mind. He thought he'd find some comfort and friends. Maybe a buddy would understand. But when Jack finally gathered the courage to tell a few close male friends, they laughed it off, called him lucky, He had been assaulted by an older woman, and to them, this was not abuse but some twisted rite of passage. For Jack, their laughter was like a knife, driving his silence deeper. It was a burden he would carry alone. His friends saw him as a liar or as someone who was just looking for attention. Jack's female friends were no better. They dismissed his story outright. To them, it was unimaginable that a young boy could be a victim in this way. Boys wanted these things, didn't they? They saw him as trying to get sympathy, something Jack had never wanted. All he needed was someone to see his pain, to say, "I believe you," but that affirmation never came. He stopped trying to talk about it. Years later, Jack found love. He thought that finally, here was the person who would understand him. The love of his life. Let's call her Sarah, seemed different. She was kind, affectionate, and understanding. They got married, and Jack believed that the horrors of his past could remain buried. Sarah didn't know, and that was fine with Jack. He wanted to protect her from his pain, and in doing so, protect himself from reliving it. But trauma has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. It happened one night, while they were watching a show on Netflix called Baby Reindeer. The show touched on themes of abuse, and it hit Jack like a sledgehammer. Memories he had worked so hard to bury came flooding back. The terror, the confusion, the helplessness, all of it overwhelmed him. Jack broke down in tears, unable to control his emotions. Sarah paused the show, concerned. She asked Jack what was wrong, and for the first time, Jack decided to tell her the truth. He shared the entire ordeal. The abuse, the manipulation, the threats, the years of pain and rejection. He cried, and Sarah held him, offering comfort. Jack felt, for a fleeting moment, that perhaps he was finally understood. He thought he was safe. But from that moment on, things began to change between them. At first, it was subtle. Sarah stopped greeting him with kisses when he came home from work. She stopped initiating intimacy. She was still polite, still civil, but the warmth was gone. Jack tried to tell himself he was imagining it, that maybe she just needed time to process what he had shared. He tried to apologize, to explain why he had kept it hidden, but Sarah brushed him off. She insisted that nothing was wrong, even though her actions said otherwise. It all came to a head during a petty argument about household chores. Jack, frustrated and hurt by her coldness, confronted Sarah about why she had lied about taking out the trash. The argument escalated, and in the heat of the moment, Sarah said something that shattered Jack's world. "At least I'm not lying about being raped." "You narcissist." Jack was stunned. It was as if the ground beneath him had crumbled. All the trust, all the love he had in Sarah, it vanished in an instant. She tried to apologize, but the damage was done. Jack packed a few clothes and left, finding solace on a friend's couch. He blocked her calls, needing space, needing to think. Jack knew that he might have overwhelmed Sarah with his trauma. He understood that it was a heavy burden to share. But what he couldn't understand was the betrayal. Sarah had taken the most painful part of his past and thrown it in his face. She had called him a liar when all he needed was for her to believe him. Despite the betrayal, Jack was conflicted. He loved Sarah, and the idea of throwing away 6 years of marriage felt impossible. He wanted to forgive her, to move past it, but he didn't know how. He thought about the times when Sarah had been his anchor, the person who made him believe in love again. He didn't want to lose that. But the words she had said, the doubt she had cast on his trauma, they replayed in his mind like a broken record. Jack tried talking to Sarah again, wanting to find a way to heal together. But every attempt ended in failure. Sarah dismissed his pain, calling him an immature crybaby. She accused him of making up his trauma for attention. And when Jack tried to reassure her, she slapped him. After that, Jack knew he couldn't stay. He slept on the couch, distancing himself from the woman he once loved. Jack eventually realized that his marriage was beyond saving. He had given Sarah every chance to understand, to support him, but she chose to belittle him instead. He filed for divorce, knowing it was the only way to protect himself. He wanted to move forward, to find a way to heal without the constant reminder of Sarah's betrayal. But Sarah didn't make it easy. She spread lies about Jack, telling their friends that he was abusive, that he was lying about everything. She even contacted his workplace, which led to Jack losing his job. Jack's world crumbled around him. He lost his marriage, his friends, his career. He felt utterly alone, betrayed by everyone he thought he could trust. Despite the overwhelming pain, Jack knew he had to keep going. He moved in with a friend who believed him, who saw his pain and offered support. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep Jack going. He began looking for a new job, finding work in construction, even though it was far from what he wanted to do. He knew that if he could just keep moving, one day at a time, he might find a way to rebuild his life. Jack's story is not just about trauma and betrayal. It's about the courage it takes to keep going when everything falls apart. He had to face the fact that sometimes, love isn't enough to heal the wounds we carry. Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who let us down the hardest. But Jack also learned that there is strength in vulnerability. For years, he had been told that his pain didn't matter, that he was weak for feeling the way he did. But by opening up, by sharing his story, Jack found a community of people who understood. Online forums, support groups, places where other survivors could say, "I believe you." It wasn't the kind of love Jack thought he needed, but it was a start. It was enough to remind him that he wasn't alone. Jack met others along the way, people with their own stories of survival. There was a woman named Maria who had also been abused as a child. Her husband had supported her, helped her through her darkest moments, and together they had built a life where her past didn't define her. Maria's story gave Jack hope that maybe, someday, he could find someone who would accept all of him, the good, the bad, and the broken. There was also David, a man who had been through a similar experience as Jack. David had been abused by a trusted family friend, and like Jack, he had kept it a secret for years. When David finally opened up, his wife had supported him, encouraging him to seek therapy, to work through the pain. David's marriage wasn't perfect, but it was built on understanding and mutual support, something Jack now knew was essential. Jack's journey was long and painful, but it taught him one crucial lesson: healing starts with believing in yourself. For years, Jack had let others define his worth. His parents, his friends, his wife, they had all told him that his pain didn't matter, that he was lying or exaggerating. But Jack knew his truth, and he learned that no one had the right to take that away from him. In the end, Jack realized that he deserved better. He deserved love that was kind, that was patient, that was willing to sit with his pain and not run from it. He deserved friends who believed in him, who supported him without question, and he deserved a life where his past didn't dictate his future. Jack is still on his journey of healing. He knows it won't be easy, and there will be days when the weight of his past feels unbearable. But he also knows that he is not alone. There are others out there who understand, who have walked a similar path, and who are ready to offer their hand when he needs it. Jack's story is a reminder that trauma does not have to define us. It is a part of who we are, but it is not the entirety of our being. With the right support, with the courage to be vulnerable, and with the strength to walk away from those who hurt us, we can rebuild, we can find love again, even if it's not in the places we once thought. And most importantly, we can find peace within ourselves.